In this presentation, we're going to add a bank account or checking account into our accounting system and the related beginning balance for it. Let's zoom into it with Xero. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars dashboard. We're going to be entering our bank accounts. Let's first take a look at our balance sheet. We're going to go to the accounting drop down. We're going to go on down to that favorite report, that balance sheet report. As that opens up, or when it opens up, we're going to be right clicking on the tab up top and duplicating that tab, pulling the balance sheet to the right, and then we'll be entering the new information on the left. So here's what we have for the balance sheet so far. So we've entered this information in, and we've got our liability down here. Now we want the bank account. That's going to be the top account up top. So we would like to add the bank account and the beginning balance for it. And that's going to be a common account even if you're starting from scratch. This is going to be our beginning balance worksheet, where you may have already set up the bank account, and then you're going to set it up in Xero, and you already have a balance in the bank account. You need to pull that over in some way, shape, or form. So that's what we're going to do here. So this is going to be, remember, our beginning balance kind of worksheets that we're imagining are from some other system in some kind of way. And we have the bank balance, which is at the $25,000 at the end of December. We want to put it in the books so that in January going forward, we have that beginning balance in there. So that's going to be our objective. So one objective, get that $25,000 on the books. The other objective is to get our bank accounts set up properly so the reconciliation is going to be easy going forward. And that's something we'll consider when we do the bank reconciliation process. So the other thing you want to consider when you enter this beginning balance, note that whatever was on the books, if we're going from the prior year ending balance, we have to enter into the books. I have to enter $25,000 in the books. Otherwise, I won't be in balance because I got to wash everything out into equity here. So I have to enter the $25,000 in there in some way, shape, or form as of December 31st if I want this thing to be in balance. Now, we also need to consider, however, the reconciliation process with the bank statement, and that's often one of the kind of problems for the beginning balance. Why? Because if you're not using bank feeds, or if you're not on a completely cash basis, you're going to have outstanding checks from the prior period that are going to be clearing in the current period. So you have to consider when you do that first bank reconciliation, how are you going to make that first bank reconciliation reconcile considering you have those timing differences? So there's two things you need to do. You need to get the $25,000 on the books in the checking account to be in balance, and then you need to consider how you're going to do that first bank reconciliation if you had reconciled before, if you had some timing differences in those accounts. And we'll think about that when we do the bank reconciliation process. So to keep that in the back of your mind after you do the beginning balances, that could be an issue, will be an issue most likely, and we'll talk about that more once we do the reconciliations. We'll do the reconciliations in its own section after we enter 2 months of data. And we'll have two kind of problems. One, the reconciliation of the first month, which has different kind of problems than the reconciliation of the second. Okay, so we're going to go back over here. We're going to go back to then our first tab and think about how we can enter the bank account. So let's go back up to the dashboard first. Now, you would think entering a new account, you would go to the accounting drop down and on down to the chart of accounts down below and enter the new account into the chart of accounts. And that is typically or normally the case. However, with the bank accounts, it's a little bit special of an account. So instead of just saying add an account here, we need to make sure that we're adding a bank account because the bank accounts are special. So you could go to the chart of accounts. That's probably where I normally go by default, and I go to add account here. Or you can go to the accounting up top and go to the bank accounts. And you'll go through a similar kind of process. Now, when you think about the bank accounts, of course, you might be considering the bank feeds options. And that's one reason that it's going to be integrated. You can have different, every system you'll know is going through the bank account. So you got that going on with the bank account. So you need to make sure that the bank accounts are formatted for that and possibly the bank feeds. If you're going to set that up, we may talk about the bank feeds in a separate section. Right now, we just want to be entering the transactions that will be flowing through to the bank. So now we're going to add the bank account. So I'm going to go ahead and add the bank account. Then we can search for the bank that we have. We can use the search field up top. There's an extensive amount of banks, so we can search the actual institution. I'm going to choose Wells Fargo here for the institution. And then we could set up the automatic bank feeds. Now, again, the bank feeds could be really useful, obviously, and save data input, but you got to understand the accounting flow, your accounting flow, before you really do that. So we want to go through just normal accounting first, and then we'll put up another section that once you kind of understand that, you can look at the bank feeds and set up the bank feeds. If you want to jump straight to the bank feeds, you can do that. But we're going to try to set up and just look at the accounting transactions that would go to the bank account. So I'm going to skip setting up the bank feeds at this time. Now I'm going to go with the checking account. I'm going to say the account type. I'm going to say every day, and then the account number That's going to be your bank account number. So if you don't want to put the whole number in at this time because you're not doing the feeds, then you got to hit some number in there in order to go forward in the system. Continue. Obviously, you can use whatever currency you're using. The main point is we're not jumping back and forth between currencies here. So again, here we have it. I'm not going to set up the bank feeds at this time. We'll probably take a look at the bank feeds at a later time. So now let's just go to our chart of accounts again, which we set up on this tab. And let's refresh this screen. And here is our checking account. So checking account has now appeared. That looks good. If I go into the checking account, I was not correct about the account number there. The account number is the code, and so we still don't have a code. I put the account number here. So this would be your bank account number, not your account code. So I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to put the code up here, which I'm going to say is going to be that 1105. So 1105, and then I'm going to save that. And it needs some account number here, so I'm going to put just an account number so it keep that happy, and then I'm going to say save, and there we have it. So now we have the code as we want it, and we're good to go. Now the next thing we need to do is enter that beginning balance in there. And I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to go back to the balance sheet and say, well, we need to get the beginning balance on the balance sheet, and the other side needs to go somewhere. So I'm just going to enter a deposit, basically, to do that. So we'll enter a deposit, but I want to enter the deposit as of the end of 2019 so that it doesn't mess anything up. And I could just deposit it directly into equity, too, our retained earnings, so it wouldn't mess anything up no matter when we put the deposit in there. So I'm going to go back over. Let's go to the first tab, and then let's go to the plus button, and let's simply say we have money in. So we want to have receive money. So we're going to say receive money. We now have our checking account that we're going to be receiving the money in from or into. And we have from, and I'm going to try to leave that blank and see. I'm going to zoom into the 125, see if it lets me do that, and if it doesn't, then I'll just put the owner ourselves that we're going to put the money in. I'm going to make sure that this is the key. We want to make sure that this is in 12/31 as the end of last year. I'm not going to put a reference number. I'll just keep that. Description, I'm going to say this is the opening balance. And I'll just say quantity 1. And the price is going to be, because we need it to be 25,000. So I'm going to say the 25,000. Now the other account, you could put it to income if you want. It doesn't matter because it's going to go on the income statement and then flow into the retained earnings where we eventually want it to be. However, it's probably more direct just simply to put it to the retained earnings account if it allows us to do that. So I'm going to see if it says retained earnings. That's the one we want. Notice I just type it in there and it'll help us to populate that account. No tax involved in it. It's just going to simply be the deposit of the 25,000. So what's this going to do when we enter this? It's going to increase the checking account by 25,000. The other side going directly to retained earnings. So we're going to say, let's check it out. Let's save that and see if that is indeed what happens, what the case will be once we enter that. It says an error. We can't have a from field being blank. So I'm just going to put owner, because this isn't from anybody. I'm going to say the owner kind of put the money in. So we'll put a new contact, which will simply be the owner. And so then I'm going to save it, see if it allows me to do it this time, or if I have some other problem that look like the. So there we have that. So it had the deposit. So now let's go back to the balance sheet and let's go ahead and update the balance sheet. And so within the balance sheet, now we have that 25,000. That's what we want. That's what we need to have. We need that beginning balance on the balance sheet in order to be in balance. If we go then into it, we're going to see the detail of our deposit that we made. There's the 25,000 for the received payment being the source document. If I go back then to the balance sheet, the other side should be going directly to the retained earnings. Let's scroll on down to the retained earnings. So here's the retained earnings. We don't have, now notice it didn't go into the current year. It's not on the income statement. It went directly into the retained earnings this time. So it wouldn't really have mattered if we entered it as of like January 2020. It wouldn't be affecting the income statement either way. So it's kind of a double check in that way. If you can put it directly in here, there it is going directly in. So then if I go back then to the balance sheet again, back to the balance sheet, and if we change the date up top, then this current items will roll into the retained earnings. So we can do that. I'm going to go up top and say, let's say if we can make this over to January, update that report, and it should then roll into retained earnings. And let's just double check the income statement, make sure there's nothing on the income statement for 2020. So to do that, I'm going to go to the prior tab, accounting dropdown. we're going to go on down to that income statement. Let's take a look at the old income statement. And if we look at the income statement for 2020, there's going to be hopefully no activity in it. Nothing's there for 2020. That's the way we want it because we haven't entered any transactions as of yet for the year 2020. If we go back to the first tab then, we see then if we scroll down here on the desktop, I'm on the desktop view. If we scroll on down in the checking account, now we have our checking account information. So we have some more information populated here. Like I said, they're going to be trying to get us to get the bank feeds going in, but you really want to understand what's going on without, normally accounting into the checking account and then consider the bank feeds at a later time. So we'll have a separate section on those bank feeds.